and experience nature-based solutions like parks and urban blue-green spaces. Studies show that people of different genders use parks and experience parks and other blue-green spaces differently, and factors like accessibility and safety shape their needs. However, gender considerations may be overlooked in the design and implementation of nature-based solutions. If we imagine a flood-prone area where we've built a network of blue-green areas to manage stormwater runoff and enhance biodiversity, if the solution does not take into account gender-specific mobility patterns and caregiving roles or safety concerns, the question is whether it really serves the entire community equitably. So we know that nature-based solutions play a key role in enhancing water and climate resilience and helping cities to mitigate climate change, restore ecosystems, and improve well-being. But without a gender perspective, these solutions can risk being inequitable, less effective, or even reinforce existing social disparities. Today, we're going to explore why and how integrating gender considerations into nature-based solutions is not just a social obligation, but is essential to maximize the impact, equity, and inclusivity of sustainable urban development. This approach aligns very closely with Water Europe's vision of a water-smart society, where the true value of water is recognized and realized to ensure water security, sustainability, and resilience for everyone. Achieving this vision requires that we actively address gender disparities in water access, governance, and decision-making. That's why Water Europe is committed to inclusive water governance, so engaging diverse perspectives and fostering cooperation across the water sector. By valuing everyone's input, we can collectively shape Europe's water future in a way that is just, sustainable, and effective. Today, we're going to hear from 4 distinguished experts who will share how addressing gender dynamics can enhance the effectiveness, inclusivity, and long-term sustainability of nature-based solutions. By integrating the diverse needs and experiences, these solutions can contribute to safer, more accessible, and thriving urban environments for all. So whether you're a policymaker, an urban planner, a water professional, or sustainability advocate, this discussion is going to offer key insights about making nature-based solutions work for everyone. I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, who will explore how gender equity and NBS in urban planning can drive sustainable and inclusive cities. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Luisa Priesta. As an advisor on the Water Europe board and strong advocate for gender equity and leadership, with 30 years experience working at the European Commission, she will highlight the economic and societal importance of integrating gender equity into nature-based solutions in urban planning. Luisa, we're eager to hear your insights on the hidden values of gender and NBS and what actions we can take to realize these values.
Thank you very much, Laura, for this nice introduction. In fact, you did already the entire speech and the entire summary of this workshop, this webinar. But I think these topics are so important that it's important to tell them and recall these issues. That's why I call these hidden values, gender and nature-based solutions. But the first thing I want to say is to thank Water Europe by inviting me to speak today. And as you know, this is a big pleasure to have this conversation on integrating 2 critical issues in urban planning. And those critical issues are really the gender and the nature-based solutions. Why? Because I consider these 2 issues have been hidden or undervalued during a long time. And even now, today, they are rarely associated to business and economic growth. They are always associated to environment, but we forget the economic aspect of it. And since we are forgetting about this, I want to give an emphasis on this today. So what I would like to do is to talk about how we can shape the future of our cities through gender inclusive innovation, while making the potential, exploring the potential of one of our most powerful resources. And those most powerful resources that normally is hidden and we forget is the ecosystem service, in this case, the nature-based solution. Anais, if you can give me the second slide. It would be nice. Okay, thank you very much. So the timing of this webinar, I consider this is perfect. And why is it perfect? Because first of all, we had 2 weeks ago or 1 week and a half ago, a major event on the upcoming water resilience strategy. And guess what? This event was a huge event organized by the European Commission in Brussels. And guess what? The nature-based solution emerged as one of the biggest opportunities to be explored. So that's why I want to emphasize this here today. Also, as you know, February and March are months that normally we celebrate women. So we had International Women's Day, we had the Women's and Girls in Science. The European Commission also issued a very important report, roadmap for women's rights. There is a lot of talks about this. And also, the European Commission issued in February the new She Figures Report 2024, and much more. So what is important to know in this, and I consider that these global conversations and debates around gender still take place, and I say still take place because gender imbalance remains a reality. Otherwise, we are not going to celebrate all this. The good news is that Europe is leading the way, and the European Commission has set some standards for gender equality, established policies, funding mechanisms, and support measures. The bad news, as you know, is that while diversity and inclusion are recognized as priorities, they are still not fully implemented across policy areas, and we are going to listen about this today. More importantly, the societal and economic benefits of gender equality and inclusion are often ignored. Concerns, research and innovation, a lot of work has been done. We have a guiding document. This guiding document, as I already said, is the She Figures report, because this She Figures report is published every 3 years and tracks the progress of gender representation across leadership, science, and innovation. In fact, this data-driven report gives us the state of the situation and also indicates what goes well, what is not working well, and where the actions can be done. But please don't make any mistakes. I know that everything is about women, women, women. You see the word woman everywhere, like woman in science, women on boards. But this is not a women issue. And this is, I think, the main message of today. This is not a women's issue. This is about economy. This is about society. And of course, it concerns us all. I don't know who is listening to us. I would like to have a statistic how many men and women are present. But this is a societal issue. So next slide, please. If we have, next slide, Anais, if we have a look at the She Figures report, and this was issued just in February, is the first time that this report appears with a very strong statement, is accompanied by a strong statement, and that is also worrying. It's a warning and a call for action. And believe me that I was there from the inception of this report, 2003. So I assisted to a lot of reports, and this is the first time that I see something like this. And it's written, Europe's innovation potential is at risk. And this is not good. And why, after so many years, why this happens? It happens because women still outnumber men in university education. We have more women than men, but they are still very strongly underrepresented, in particular in STEM. STEM is science, technology, engineers, and mathematics, across all the careers and at leadership stages. This is important because those are the fields that we need more now. The report reveals also a widening gender gap in very important sectors like ICT and artificial intelligence. We are coming to this. And all this, it's not just deepening and putting threat the resources of Europe. It's also putting threats the long-term competitiveness of Europe. So if gender disparities persist, and they still exist at the higher level of research, we are really not in line with the Draghi's report. We are not, and we are endangering our future. One thing that also strikes me is that women in science still publish less than men, much less. They are 1/3 of the authors, and being 1/3 of the authors, this means also all the algorithms in artificial intelligence, they may be biased, they are biased. So the impact is really huge. And this represents missed economic opportunities. We know that the workforce lacking gender diversity also lacks diversity of thought, which is essential for the cutting edge advancements, for the technology, and for the future we want to build. Next slide, please. I brought 3 slides now that are for those that like to see evidence and statistics. They are very well-known slides. Every 3 years we have those slides with the picture of the situation. In fact, and unfortunately, the picture of the situation is almost the same. It changed 2%, which is really very, very little. The first one, women are green and men are here in blue. What can we see is that at the beginning of the careers, we have much more women than men. We have almost 60% of the graduates. We have almost 50% of the doctorates, the PhDs. And then we see, this is the scissors diagram, that across the career, women are leaving. This is the leaking pipeline or whatever you want. But what happens is that at the end of their career, their position is very lower compared and representation in their positions than to men. So if we start at the beginning, with 60% of resources, at the end we arrive to less than 30%, and in decision making just 26%. This is all the disciplines. So here we are considering social science, humanities, health, engineering, and so on. Next slide, please. This next slide is the one that is worrying. There is no news about this. We know that women, they are much less represented in these fields, in technical fields, and at the end of their career, so it's really very, very low. As self-employed, they are just represent 25%, and in leader positions, as I said, 20%, which is not 20%, is 1/5 of the workforce, so it's really very low. The next slide, please. I like this slide because it gives, it's unfortunate, I like to show it because it represents the fields of study. And here we see that the fields of study that we are talking more today, women are very low represented. So we are talking about ICT, engineering, mathematics, environmental science, and green tech. And this word green tech, it's important. So please, next slide. This green tech brings us to a tech gap. We call this the gender gap, the gender tech gap, because what we know is in the next 30 years, we are expected to generate in the tech industry 60 million new jobs globally. Of course, we don't have women resources for this. Only 20% on the workers of green tech are women. Women workforce in digital is less than 20. Artificial intelligence, machine learning is really shocking, because in machine learning the percentage goes to 60%. And in the water sector, women are, for the moment, 23% of the engineers and managers. So this is worrying. And this is worrying not just because in the number of resources, and it's not a resource issue, a human resource issue, but if we are not able of addressing this gap, very quickly, we risk to design a green and digital future, because this is the transition that we want. That is not inclusive, that is not efficient, that is not fair, and that is not profitable. So measures need to be done very quickly. Next one. So now let's see what's going to happen if we translate these results. And this is funny. If we translate these results in urban planning. And just imagine, this is an exercise. Just imagine that we are designing cities, technology, and policy, and we are leaving out half of the population. I don't know what the result will be, but I'm sure that the cities will be incomplete. This is a possibility, to have a city that is completely incomplete and that we don't like to live there. I don't know. But what is going to happen is that if we ignore gender considerations in urban planning, because women are not involved, are not inclusive, because the algorithms, they don't have the experience of women, what may happen is that we develop cities that don't fool completely or serve their populations, that we overlook economic opportunities, and of course will reinforce the existing inequalities. So again, something needs to be done, but there is a good news. Next slide. And this good news is that studies say that diversity and inclusion pay off, and pay off in terms of money, in terms of budget. And normally people like to listen to this. So we know that a diversity workforce leads to more innovation, better decision-making, and stronger economies. There is a study on the European Investment Bank that really comes with figures about this. We know that diverse and inclusive teams are more creative, and companies with diverse and inclusive, not only diverse and inclusive, that are more inclusive teams in the boards, see up to 30% of the increase in profitability. So this is something that we should not forget, because we are endangering also our economy if we are not diverse and inclusive. So the conclusion is that inclusion and diversity are not optional, but they are essential. Next slide, please. This is something, again, that I want to emphasize, and we should all be clear, is that integrating gender balance, equality, and equity is a different concept, are not women issues. It's not about fairness. It's just not just about equality, but it's also about economy, society, and therefore engage all genders if you want to shape a better future. This is more or less what I said at the beginning, but I think this should be understood and shared by everybody. Next slide. Now let's go to another aspect. And some projects, like the multi-source project, are very clear about this, about the statement that I said, and when they integrate gender, they really go beyond percentages and balance of teams. They are aware and they acknowledge the benefits of addressing what we call gender dimension. And you remember that I said that just 2% of the projects integrate gender dimension. Research projects integrate 2% of the gender dimension in their research, which is really a mistake. So the gender dimension, integration of gender dimension refers to the content, and it allows to avoid, this is the aim, gender bias consideration that could lead to wrong results. What does that mean? What does that mean in water, for instance, in the water field, because we are talking about water? It means that, for instance, whenever we treat a project that have pollutants of non-treated water, the impact on the health of women are different from the impact on health of men. So the sex consideration should be there, otherwise the results may be wrong. It means that when we define technology or or tools like, for instance, water pumps. We have to adapt this to the physical characteristic of women, not just of men. It means that when we are talking about artificial intelligence and we are developing algorithms, we need to take consideration of different behaviors from men and women and different emotions. It means also that we have to take in consideration the role of women in the society, in saving water, in reusing water, in awareness, in daily practice. So this is including gender dimension. And we have two important reports that you have in the slides. And even this time, the She Figures report presented a policy brief just on this. But despite all these benefits, because the benefits of including a gender dimension is, of course, improving the quality and the accuracy of the results. Sometimes it really avoids wrong results. It leads to better products, better technologies, and of course, it boosts economic performance. It's also related to market. But despite of this, today, only 2% of the projects take this into consideration. So again, this is an enormous gap in missed opportunities, in particular its quality of the opportunities, but also economic opportunities. Um, next slide. This slide, it's about the impact of considering a gender dimension in the nature-based solution. I know that you are going to talk about this, all the other speakers. So the impact is economic, there is also social value, jobs, and well-being. So the first aspect is that when we think about nature-based solutions like urban wetlands, vertical gardens, green roofs, we always think about environmental benefits. But just considering the ecosystem service alone, we know that nature-based solutions provide a long-term sustainability and huge economic profits. In the last event that I talked at the beginning on the water resilience strategy, there were some critical and huge economic values on this. Of course, the multi-source project takes this into consideration, goes beyond just the percentage, and tries to demonstrate this in the pilots for the treatment, storage, and reuse. In terms of social impacts, because it goes beyond this, the social impacts of nature-based solution are also very important, because it is demonstrated that involving women, integrating gender dimension in nature-based solution, improve the public health and safety in the cities, and this is very important. Jobs and sustainable urban development, community resilience, and climate change. So nature-based solution and gender integration, they go hand in hand, and they should be considered and reinforced each other. I have to tell you that I work in the commune of Uccle in Belgium, and we are very keen about this. And it's important also, I consider this is a good thing, that the quality of the quality policies are together with the environmental ones. And it's true that we arrive to have the result is that we have some policies that are taking the gender dimension in transportation, in environment. So it works when we work hand in hand. Next slide. Of course, next slide is about challenge opportunities and also tools. We have a lot of challenge. We have a lot of opportunities. I'm not going to talk all about them, because you are going to touch them as well. Of course, the key challenge are social and cultural norms, but one important that I consider very important is the resource constraints. If we had more funding for this, it would be much better. And it's also important to know that the opportunities are more strong than the challenge. So it means that it's doable, that we can advance very quickly in this direction, because we have very effective tools, and effective tools, as I consider, is stakeholders engagement. We are going to talk this about maybe later. and in particular through the living labs, and Water Europe put in place the water-oriented living labs. That is a tool or methodology that really supports the integration of gender dimension and inclusion in nature-based solutions as between others. Next slide and final slide. The way forward, because this is what we need to know. How can we build smarter, inclusive, and resilient cities? We have two choices. We can decide, let's go on, let's continue, business as usual. But we can decide also, let's take action and let's value gender integration, nature-based solutions, acknowledge that this is the best way and even the less expensive way in terms of economic, social, and sustainable solutions for resilient cities that can be developed and implemented very quickly. I don't know what is your opinion. I have my opinion. I took my choice. I have my choice. I think that multi-source as well, and I think that it takes the choice as I take. And this is what I leave for the reflection for all of us, hoping that we all take the good choice for this. Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to my next colleague.
Thank you, Luisa. That's a very compelling call to action, and you've really clearly shown why gender inclusion is not just about fairness, but it's about unlocking innovation and economic potential, and ultimately our long-term competitiveness. So I really look forward to exploring a little bit more how we can leverage these missed opportunities to build smarter, more inclusive, and more resilient cities. But you highlighted an issue that our next speaker, Anna Kalin, will look at in much more detail. So this challenge about translating policies into effective action. Anna Callan's a gender expert from the Forum for Equitable Development, and she will share with us some insights from the Multisource project about how well gender is currently integrated in NBS and what practical steps can be taken to bridge the policy practice gap. Anna, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning. I hope that you can see my screen. Yes. Yeah, I am the gender expert from Multisource. And maybe just for a bit of a background, when I had the honor to be invited into Multisource, that was, I think, about 5 years ago from now. Our NGO, Forum for Equitable Development, we had some small experience with nature-based solutions, or sort of the nexus between gender and nature-based solutions and environmental issues, mainly focusing in Uganda and Albania. So obviously, as a bit of an outsider, I had to really understand and really learn what are nature-based solutions. So obviously, I started with that was the first deliverable in the first year of the project with the literature review. So I started with the definition. What is a nature-based solution? And you have on the slide the definition by IUCN and then some additional definitions. And from all the definitions that I've read, it was clear that obviously, nature-based solutions are inspired, they're supported by nature, but very important. They're dealing with a societal challenge, trying to solve them. But when doing so, they're not only looking at environmental co-benefits, but also social and economic. But the literature review that I undertook sort of showed that, at least that's how I understood the picture then, and I still do till this day, is that there is a bit of a gap between this definition and how they're perceived, in the sense that they're more often perceived as a technical solution to an environmental issue and not something that is very holistic. So, sorry. Yeah. As Luisa has mentioned, the EU has, since basically the Treaty of Rome, been very supportive of gender equality. And when it comes to the European research area, it's 2012 is a very important year. And then with the Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, the commitment to gender equality has even strengthened. And now, public entities that are part of or applying for Horizon funds have to have gender equality plans. They have to have gender balance. Gender has to be mainstream into project activities. And then there's also this multidisciplinary approach and intersectional approach. So here on the slide you can see sort of some of the points that are reflected in the Horizon 2020 and Europe calls, sort of the demands, how gender needs to be included into the project proposals. But then what happens in practice? And again, Luisa, there are a lot of things that Luisa has mentioned that I will repeat, but hopefully in some more detail. And then we come to practice. And as I sort of started this intervention, I started saying that there was this gap between, what is in theory and then what is the practice. And I think this is something that has been ongoing throughout the project. So in 2024, last year, I did a survey or a set of research within Multisource. But to have a larger data set, I also reached out to 5 consortia funded by Horizon. And they're dealing either with MBS and or water management. And they're specifically Cardimet, NICE, Smart Climate, Boosting, and Network Nature. And of course, not everybody from this large number of organizations answered the survey, but nevertheless, these are the results. The gender balance overall is actually not bad in all of the consortia. But then when we come to actually going into specific categories, this is where the gendered roles and stereotypes and norms that Luisa has spoken about are more reinforced. So if we have a relative balance overall, there are more male researchers. There are many more male or less male non-researchers and more male task and work package leads. And actually, maybe what Luisa has mentioned, that Multisource is paying a lot of attention to this gender dimension. It's showing because when you look at the non-research numbers in the other 5 consortia, it's much larger compared to Multisource. And then the other element of gender disaggregated data and gender analysis. So obviously gender disaggregated data is sort of the initial phase where you try to understand the picture. And in the case of Multisource, it is always conducted in 20% of the time. In the 5 consortia, 33% of the time. And then based on the gender disaggregated data, the gender analysis can be taken. And in the daily tasks of Multisource partners, they do it 10% of the time, and in the other consortia, 13% of the time. So obviously there is better faring off when it comes to gender parity than compared to gender mainstreaming and other more, I would say, demanding tasks, but also time-consuming tasks. So what can be done in practice? At the institutional level, and I'm talking now about practitioners, so organizations that are carrying out nature-based solutions, the adoption of gender equality plans is a requirement by Horizon. But there are a few points that are very important. So the gender equality plans are not just sort of a tick, like something that you say, I do have a gender equality plan so that you can apply for the project. Support from leadership is really important. Yearly monitoring. So again, it's not just a piece of paper, but it's something that is on a yearly basis being checked. Gender equality training is really important. May it be about unconscious bias, again, gender stereotypes, norms, but also specifically how to mainstream gender into the project, into the work. And because of, again, all the graphs about the share of men and women, specifically in STEM, this promotional work-life balance is really important. To at least to try and keep the women that enter in the business. At the staff level, yes, it is important to have more women in lead positions, as the statistics that I showed earlier showed. But it's not just enough to have women included. It's also important that their voices are heard and then included in the final decision. So throughout the project, I came to the conclusion that I think it is important to have a gender and diversity expert that is part of the project. And having also gender focal points for partners, because also the research that I was talking about show that a lot of the experts from different partners carry out the gender assessment on gender equality or gender mainstreaming in their free time. And of course, whatever is not done as part of the project, as part of being paid for, then it has less possibilities that it's going to be done. Obviously, the project needs to include gender mainstreaming in all of its phases, from the situation analysis, design, implementation, and monitoring. And then this planning for and during events. It's also something that it's really trying to ensure that the way that events throughout the project, maybe also when planning the project or when actually trying to assess the situation, but also, throughout the project, that they are inclusive spaces, that there are more bottom up than top down spaces, and that actually, continuous thought is put into how to include people that are usually not part of the debate. And so it's really important to also think about how does power operate in these spaces. There is commitment at the policy level, but then there's a gap when the policies are being implemented. So how can we bring this knowledge of sort of where there are the missing gaps back into the policy level and try to improve the requirements at the policy level to sort of give it another push for the implementation level? Again, it comes back to gender equality plans, but of course, there can always be more demand for more ambitious gender equality plans. As part of the plans, there can be mandatory gender equality training. They have to be made, they can be made mandatory, the yearly reporting. And then, of course, obviously, the weaknesses that are discovered in this yearly reporting are the ones that need to be taken into consideration in the preparation for the next gender equality plan. In the calls for proposals, as I showed on, I believe, the second slide, there already are demands as part of Horizon how to include gender. But of course, they can, again, be made more ambitious. There can be specific elements defined that award points in the project proposal, inclusion of gender analysis, collection of gender disaggregated data. There have to be measurable gender-specific deliverables. Besides the impact of nature-based solutions on the environment, there can also be an impact or a demand to carry out an impact on how the project affected gender equality and equity. Again, there can be a gender budget as part of the requirement that include gender experts and gender focal points. So as I've mentioned, the research executive agency, it's sort of like the agency that is taking care or is the head for Horizon calls. And as I mentioned, it's important that we have support from the top leadership. So support from the research executive agency is really important also in this case. So the agency could support projects that teach how to promote gender mainstreaming and how to be more gender sensitive all over the universities or in the academic world. But also projects can be supported that provide evidence that mainstreaming gender does make a difference when it comes to project. Because actually in the research, when the question was asked, what needs to change so that you would mainstream gender into your work on a daily basis? So there was dedicated funding, new modus operandi in the sense of more of an intersectional approach. And the third one was to have evidence, proof that including gender into the work makes a difference. Then again, the agency could support the creation of a Horizon Gender Expert Group that would meet on a panel twice a year, but also include gender focal points to learn from good and bad practices. There could be an evaluation of Horizon funded projects to understand what are the sort of the obstacles to promoting gender, but also what are the strong points. And of course, also within the agency, regular training on gender equality and including gender experts in all of the panels. And I think this was an interesting point mentioned before about artificial intelligence and about the reproduction of stereotypes. It is important that, like I said, gender experts are part of all the evaluations of project proposals, but also, regular project evaluations. As part of multi-source, these two briefs were developed based on which I was just taking data out of them. One is for practitioners, how to be more gender sensitive, and the other one is for decision makers, again, how to be more gender sensitive. And that's all from my side for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for sharing these critical insights on how we can all step up our efforts to make NBS and similar projects more gender inclusive. Let's continue by exploring the key barriers and opportunities when implementing gender-sensitive approaches in NBS research with our next speaker, Viviane Japiasoviana, the Gender Advisor for the NICE project. Viviane, over to you.
So hi, thank you for this opportunity. Can you see me? Okay. Some of the highlights that I wanted to share it is already put it for my colleagues, but well, we have a lot of challenges concerning gender sensitive approach in nature-based solutions. Some highlights, it's well, we have underrepresentation, as we all know, of female in leadership positions in science and technology careers. And when we think about the positions in universities and research institutions, we have less women when we think about the higher positions. So this kind of difference and gaps make more challenging to have equity in our teams. So we can see that in the projects and the researchers that we analyze, and even we try to use the same number to promote equality and gender sensitive balance. It is sometimes depending of the region and the field, it's very difficult to find these women to put in these positions. In our case, I'm from Brazil, so even in Brazil, we are facing these problems. We have a lot of laws trying to change the game, but even so, sometimes it's hard. When we are projects focused in gender equality, even so, it's hard. So women in STEM, well, we are less than the men in these STEM careers. So thinking in word numbers, it's less than 30% in engineering and also in artificial intelligence and innovation. And when we look for any of these technology and innovation fields, it's hard to understand how we can change the game because the numbers are increasing, but very, very slow. So when we think in nature-based solutions and we think about to develop new ways to deal with our nature, it's hard to find these women to put in this solution. It's what people say. Sometimes I think they just don't look hard. Well, let me see. So when we look for the numbers in research fields, we are in 3 professionals. So and depending of the field, that can change. Well, in national academies of science, these numbers are unbalanced. So thinking about nature-based solutions and the projects that we are running around the world, many of these projects are attached to agricultural and lands rights. And we have a lot of challenge when we thought about ownership, because we have still some countries where women can't be the owner of some the lands. So when we think about to change the ways to cultivate foods, for example, we have to face this kind of difference depending of the country. So even women are 50% of the people who are producing food, and this is a very important key point when you think about food security and the water security too. Women are all around. We are we have a key sorry. Well, we're the key. Let's say like that. We are the key. We are very important in these ways, but we don't have the right to honor the lands, and also sometimes women don't have the voice to be in the board to discuss how we have the change that. So when we are running nature-based solution projects in these cases, sometimes difficult to have the balance in our boards, in our workshops to discuss with the people who we want to achieve. So it's still a very complicated thing to deal in some places. Well, talking about this project that I'm advisor, it's with a lot of your institutions we are working together. We had, well, the project tried.
Sorry, Vivian, to interrupt you. Are we supposed to see your slides?
Yeah, I'm sharing.
Okay. Yeah, no, we cannot see them.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Apologize.
I don't know why. Let's stop it. I will show you again. Can you see now?
Now we can see them. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. Well, okay, I will go back to the numbers in research that I told you about it. So now I was talking about the lands rights. So we can see in this map there is we have a huge gap in land ownership and landing rights around the world. In some places, in some countries, it's not women are not allowed to own our land, so they work hard in this food production, but they can't be the owner.
Many
So
apologies, Vivian. Many apologies. But I don't think we are seeing the right slide. We can see.
There is no problem. It's closing without my permission. And now you can see.
I think we are seeing your PDFs maybe.
My what?
Some documents open.
Oh, okay. So I have to change the. And now, sorry. Now it is okay.
Now we can see a map.
Okay, that's the map.
Okay.
That's the sharing. Okay.
Thank you.
Now you can see my slide, right?
Yes, now we can see the slides.
So, okay, you can tell me if that this disappears, sorry. So that's the map, and that's the situation that I'm talking about. So in our projects, that I am a gender advisor, so I receive some data to discuss, to understand how our projects try to be gender sensitive. So from the beginning, we had this this point to consider in selecting the team and trying to balance the audience in the webinars and the course, but sometimes it's not so balanced. So this is the data. When we look for the staff on the project, it looks like we have a good balance, right? It's almost half and a half to male and female. But when we analyze the positions, that's changed a little bit, because when we saw the researchers, it's not so balanced like the numbers are not, the numbers are good when we think about the situation in the world and other fields, but still we have to improve the number of the leaders in our work package, and also we have to make better our numbers in when we talk about the researchers, because when we see the non-researchers, the women are more than males. So thinking about this kind of projects, when we saw Latin American case, when we talk about voluntary jobs and unpaid jobs, women are always there. And so when we talk, well, there is money on the table, well, the men just disappear and the women are there. Not only talking about the care jobs, but talking about any fields when we talk in voluntary jobs. So sometimes to participate in these workshops, that's the problems with the gender expectations in jobs and the division of these jobs make a huge hole, because sometimes men are just working out and women are here, but they have to be on the house and working for the family, so they don't have the time to be engaged in paid jobs. So that's the number in nice projects. I think we have to think and reflect about how are women represented in these different decision-making levels. So this kind of projects, when we are designing nature-based solution projects, we have to start to think about gender from the beginning, from the planning. Otherwise, it's very hard to balance that. And I think the nature way, it's to try to balance this, balance that on the audience. So that's not the same of to have the leaders, the balance in leadership. So when we think about also the team, we have to think about in this leadership what kind of activities they will do, because sometimes even we have balance in the team, in the leader team, we have also this gender gap in when the team, well, when the leader have to deal with money, have to deal with the bigger decisions, they are male and not women. So that's a huge problem. And in the communities, we have to ensure the meaningful participation of the women. They have to be there, but they have to be on the table with voice and put in perspective their situation. When we propose some activities that they have to plant something, so how we can consider their knowledge, the community knowledge in these cases, the necessities of the women, thinking about they have to deal with the family, so how we can put that in the table, how we can put that as a standard to think about our solutions, because sometimes that's not in consideration. And also we have to consider intersectionality, because depending of the region, if we look for Brazilian or Latin American or African situation, we have to put that we have population in vulnerability situation. So how we can put that together, the gender balance ways, race, class, and other factors, social factors that we can put on the table too. And thinking about the project implementation and monitoring, it's very important to have specific indicators to measure gender equity. Because sometimes if we don't think about these indicators, we can't understand if our project is really gender sensitive. So we have to monitor that the gender in all activities and with all the groups that we are working with. And and also to finish, a big problem that we have, it's the data. So our project has to generate these indicators and think about disaggregate this data, because otherwise we can't understand how the gender runs some problems, or if we are getting better in some way, or in our project, if we have gender parity or not. So we face a very difficult, a very hard, sorry, we face a problem when we think about data and the gender data, if you think the official data. So some countries don't have this kind of information. They just think about regions or age, or how much people gains, but we don't have information about the gender of the affected people. If you think about disasters, for example, it's unusual to have the information of deaths and affected people by gender. So with this way, with this scenario, we can understand how we can change the game and make our projects more gender balanced. So we have a lot of problems in our researchers, not specifically in our projects, okay? In researchers with nature-based solution at all. With data, specifically data, and how we can implement and monitoring the indicators. So we have to think about that from the beginning. That's it. Sorry about all these complications.
No problem. Thank you, Vivian. It's really interesting to hear how you emphasize the importance of disaggregating data towards the development of more inclusive strategies and ensuring gender responsive NBS. So I think implementing change requires that we also have a structured approach, and this is where systemic change management comes into play. To take us through this, let's welcome Anita Dagnolia Valan, a consultant for the United Nations and a leading expert in social behavioral change for the Sustainable Development Goals. Anita, we look forward to your insights.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you, Water Europe, for inviting me. Just let me 1 second to share the screen. I will shift. Okay, can you see it? Can you just give me a sign
Yes,
if
yes,
you can?
we can see it.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, today I will talk with you about systemic change management as a concrete discipline to make the green transition just and successful. And I would like to start with a question for you, which is the following. What is there between a nature-based solution and its expected results and sustainability? What do you think is there between the two? We have the nature-based solution and the resources for its implementation. And on the other side, we have the expected results. I don't mean as an expected result, I don't mean only its implementation, which is maybe more about the infrastructure related topic, but when I mention results, I want to mean more about the impact and the positive impact. So between the idea and the project of a nature-based solution and its positive impact, there is a bridge. And what do you think is this bridge made of? Do you have any idea? Okay, just give you a suggestion, is made of system and people. This bridge means the ownership, adoption, and correct management of the idea and the solution, because its implementation is not enough to be successful. And this is what systemic change management does, which we can call also organizational or behavioral or social change. It's a real discipline dealing with the human side of the change. If we don't include the human side of the change in the green transition, it risks being, sorry, just let me push this away because I don't see. Okay, great. It risks being unsuccessful. If we don't have this bridge, we risk not having the implementation, and in a few minutes we will go through an example, a concrete example, or we risk to implement it but without the positive expected result, or we risk to implement it but with consequent negative results, which unfortunately it is possible and not uncommon as we would like to think. Or we have an implementation of a nature-based solution which is not sustainable in the long run. Let's take an example, green areas in city centers to reduce urban warming and have fresher zones during summertime. So we want to build, to have more green areas in a given city. We don't have this bridge. So we don't include the human side components, the human side of the change into our projects, which means that people are not included in the solution design, so in the project design phase, and are not enabled to adopt, own, manage, and take care of this solution. What does it happen? We have many possible consequences. I just selected 3, which are the most, common. People resist change and obstruct the solution. Let's take the example. People complain against the municipalities because they want parking and not green areas. So the municipality decides to stop the project. Another option, the solution is implemented, but green areas become dangerous for women, which we all know that happens. Another possible solution, another possible scenario, sorry, the solution is implemented, people change their purchasing related behaviors because they cannot get close to shops by their car. Shops close, green areas become dangerous, and they are finally abandoned. So this bridge is absolutely important, and we have to think about it, to think on how to build it. So the following question is, if we want to properly build it, the following question is, what is this bridge made of? And we have 2 key components. First, it is made of a set of methodologies, tools, and strategies, which are part of this discipline called systemic change management or organizational change, involving and aligning, and above all, enabling the target system and its people from the idea of the nature-based solution to its real implementation. But that's not enough. It is also made of people inclusion and representativeness of the target systems in terms of gender and diversity. Systemic change management is not enough if it is not inclusive and if it doesn't represent the real components of the target system. This means that without systemic change management, there will not be any bridge. And consequently, the achievement of the expected result will be jeopardized, as we saw in the example before concerning green areas in urban city centers. If we don't have gender mainstreaming and inclusion of all categories that are part of the target system, maybe the solution will be implemented, but risk not being effective, not being relevant, not having a positive impact, not being sustainable, or even worse, and it happens, creating additional problems. And this means that the quality of the expected result will be jeopardized. Why do you think that the quality of the expected result will be jeopardized without gender equality and diversity inclusion? You own the answer because my colleagues, the other speakers, previously and relevantly highlighted the importance of including gender and diversity. But I think that repeating it is never enough. Well, first, because the project or the solution does not consider nor meet the needs of a huge part of population. And secondly, because the project or the solution does not take advantage of the existing resources of a huge part of population. And as we several times mentioned before, there is a strong intersection of sustainability, gender equity, and urban resilience. This means that gender mainstreaming empowers nature-based solution and allow them to be effective, relevant, sustainable, and so on. But it's also true the opposite. Nature-based solutions empower women and advance gender equality. So this interconnection is absolutely important. And fortunately, we have so many interesting examples and case studies to go through and to explore as an inspiration. Here I selected one which is so interesting in my viewpoint, which is the women-led urban greening initiative in Kenya. Kiberia Green Women Group initiated an urban greening project aimed at restoring degraded land by planting trees and vegetation, establishing community gardens to improve food security and nutrition, and implementing green infrastructure such as permeable pathways and rain gardens to reduce flooding and improve water retention. It was a real success. And as we can see, the key impacts are really comprehensive. It's not only about environment, it's not only about women, but it is about economic empowerment. It is about climate resilience and urban cooling, but also about social and community benefits and policy positive impact and influence. So it's really important to consider not only change management as a tool to succeed in the green transition, but also to make it really gender representative and also representative in terms of diversity. We have another leading example, which is not really an example, but is an example of an approach, which is Vienna's garden-sensitive urban planning and nature-based solutions. The city of Vienna has been a pioneer in incorporating gender perspective into urban design, ensuring that public spaces and green areas are accessible, safe, and beneficial for all genders. This approach not only promotes equality, as we mentioned before, but also enhances the effectiveness of nature-based solutions in urban settings. So just to recap two key insights as conclusions. To succeed in the green transitions and nature-based solutions, projects must include the human side of change. At the very initial, from the very initial stage, from the analysis of the problems, from the project design. And the human side of change related disciplines, which are organizational change or behavioral and social change, must mainstream gender and diversity as core drivers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita, for that insightful perspective on how systemic change management ensures gender and diversity can be at the heart of nature-based solutions. Your talk really underscores how to create a truly inclusive, resilient urban area, we need to align social norms and behaviors with decision-making structures and sustainability goals. So let's dive deeper into some of these ideas with a short panel discussion. I realize we're running a little bit behind time, but we still have time for a few questions, a little bit of discussion, and we have such an incredible lineup of experts to explore these challenges and opportunities. So if everyone is back with your cameras on, if it's all right, I'd like to just kick off our discussion by asking Louisa, I'm really intrigued by your comment about this is not just a women's issue, it's a societal issue. And I think that really resonates. And we heard that throughout all of the talks today. You mentioned that the European Commission is a global leader in gender equity and inclusiveness, and that they've set policies, put them into practice, and designed funding instruments that support these measures. Can you give us some examples of recent measures that have really made a difference and had a rapid impact in the career progression or innovation?
Yes, in fact, there are some examples. Thank you for these questions. But most of the measures they take a long time. So normally between policymakers, we have 3 approaches to implement gender equality. This is a very structured way of defining it. First of all, is fixing the numbers, and fixing the numbers as of women in science, in medicine, engineering, and so on, and make sure that we have balanced representations in teams. So it's about numbers, about percentage, and we talked about this today a lot. An example is, for instance, now the directive on women on boards that set some targets for the future on women on boards, and that will create a change. We don't know yet, but I'm sure that it will create a big change. The second is fixing the institutions. Fixing the institution goes a little beyond, and it's related to structural change. And some of the colleagues talk about this, like Anita talked about this. And the idea is to remove barriers and transforming structures. And the third one is more difficult to understand, but is really very, very important. It takes longer time, and it is fixing the knowledge. And we talked about this, is incorporating gender analysis into basic and applied research, projects and activities. So we are fixing the numbers, fixing the institutions, fixing the knowledge. Which one has the most effective way, according to me, and rapid results is fixing the institutions and fixing the organizations. And for this, and one of you already mentioned, according to me, one of the most striking measure with a real impact was the inclusion of the gender equity plan's eligibility criteria for research and innovation that is valid for public bodies, research organizations, and higher education establishments. So those organizations were obliged and are still obliged to have a gender action plan. A gender action plan is not just a paper or a document. It's a living action plan. So the organization is obliged to collect data, is obliged to dedicate some thinking, to dedicate some time, resources and means money, and raise awareness and put in place a training and the reporting that is very, very important. You know that what is measured is done. What gets measured gets done. And this is very important. So this is those organizations, they really went through a structural change, and this in 3 years, because we started in 2022. Apart from this, there was a cultural change. And why? Because these changes have to be discussed in the board at a higher level. So therefore, it increased the awareness to gender equality among staff and management. And this created a certain dialogue, consensus of the decision taken. And there is a study from the Commission that analyzed what were the benefits of all this. And it went even beyond, because those organizations that implemented the Gender Action Plan, they resulted in strengthening the gender-related research topics. So it had an impact on the research topics, on the projects, and on the innovation. Because if you include gender, you have more innovative ideas, you are more close to the market, you make more money about this. So this was an extra, secondary effect, very, very important. And the last one is that those organizations, there is evidence that they increase their productivity. And this is incredible. Why? Because the implementation of the gender action plans could create productivity of the institution just through more publications and more awards. So, in fact, a very small action that seemed to be, this is annoying, now we have to do a paper. It's not true. It's not true. It gave a lot of benefits in the institution, in the culture, in the research quality, in the innovation and productivity. So I think this is a very good example, and we got the examples in 3 years and could be replicated for the private sector. I think that we should encourage all the institutions and organizations to have a gender action plan.
Thanks, Luisa. So this is really interesting in light of Anna's presentation in particular, where you showed that there's still disparity. So how do you think, or based on your experience, Anna, why do you think there's still a gap between the gender equality policies at EU level and their practical implementation in NBS projects?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, after the sort of quantitative research, I also did a bit of a qualitative interviews with partners from Multisource, and this was one of the questions specifically. Now I'm talking about the gender equality plan. I was asking them, do you think that having a more ambitious, more mandatory requirements about the gender equality plan, do you think this is something useful, or do you think it's actually going to be seen as a too intrusive? And yes, there were some thoughts that change can only come with time, and it occurs when it comes from the organization bottom up and not top down. But at the same time, I mean, I would agree that gender equality plans are an important step, and they do make a contribution. But I think all these changes are slow. We have another project that's taking place in Slovenia, and we are working on gender equality action plans. And a lot of times they are just documents that organizations have or public entities have so that they can apply for projects. Of course, there are also cases when they're really taken seriously, but a lot of times they're there because they need to be there. So I think that it does help if the person or the organization or the EU, European Commission, that is given the funds requests more of public entities, because this is the way that then maybe it's going to motivate you to actually do something more. But I think obviously there's an underlying issue of gender stereotype, gender norms, gender roles, and as mentioned, they were much more present in STEM. I mean, they're present everywhere, but more in STEM. And I think this is also another perception that, okay, so maybe we're not really there when it comes to gender equality in Europe, but we're nearly there. So we don't really need to do so much with it, because, and this is another thing that a lot of examples that are given, and also the literature review that I did, a lot of the examples or most of the practices, methodologies, tools are done in sort of so-called developing countries. But the reality in Europe and developing countries, it's different. We have different issues, and they're also less obvious. So I think that there's a lot of lacking data, information, why this is the case. But then, this kind of subconscious bias is something that, we all have, even though we think that we might not. But and I think it exists both in men and women in different ways, in a sense that, when I was trying to understand sort of this MBS world and the water management and so on, I realized that there's a lot of much more push from men in sort of research and innovation in the so-called traditional male fields, because they feel towards women in the sense of, how did you dare come enter my field, compared to social sciences. But then also from the side of women, I have come across quite a lot of women that said gender quotas are a bad thing, because they think that we're in a position just because of the quota and not because we're actually capable of being in a position of power. But they're actually just an instrument to help to navigate in this world that is full of gender norms and subconscious biases. So I think, yeah, I would say that probably these are some of the factors, but yeah, important ones.
Thanks, Anna. You and Louisa have both highlighted the importance of improving our knowledge. Louisa says we fix the knowledge. You talk about needing more data. And I think this speaks to what Vivian was mentioning earlier about disaggregation of data. So, Vivian, coming to you, how can we ensure that the data generated by NBS projects effectively contributes to the analysis and decision making that take gender perspective into account?
Thank you, Laura. Well, we have to, for the beginning, we have to training the team and the leaders to understand how we have to adopt a gender-sensitive approach and the importance of having this data disaggregated, because sometimes they just think this is not so important. This is we can look for these later. So from the beginning. We have to collect and analyze data separately from about how considering gender, so and marginalized groups and these intersectionality. If we consider that in all our qualitative and quantitative methods, that's nice to have this data on the finish and when we are analyzing the projects. And we have to train the project team to collect this data and understand and analyze how these make some difference in our approach. And also, it's very important to look for the policies that we already have in the calls on the institutions, and even we in the country or in the cities, because we already have a lot of effort to trying to impulse that approach. And it's good to engage women in collect that data collection. So if it is possible, it's good, because sometimes they are more engaged with community projects, and they already have this work, this informal work, trying to engage people. So to contribute to decision making, we have to generate and analyze this gender data from the beginning and during all the projects in all the steps, because otherwise it's difficult to understand if we are effectively adopting a gender sensitive approach.
Thanks, Vivian. That's a really good explanation. And I think it feeds well into this question that I had for Anita. So all of this sounds very systematic in its approach, trying to put everything into place and, hit all these three main categories that Louisa mentioned. Anita, why is systemic change management so important to the success of nature-based solutions? And how can we use systemic change management to embed gender equity within NBS actions?
Thank you, Laura, for this question. Systemic change management is absolutely important because, as we saw in the presentation, it is really the bridge. So, what is this bridge exactly about? Systemic change management provides us with a specific methodology to focus at two levels, to create human environments conducive really to change and to successfully achieve the expected results by working at two levels: the system level, which means, or the organizational level, as we prefer to call it, which means to change the rules, which can be policies, formal rules, or social codes, informal rules. Which means to change the way the system functions. If we don't change the way this target system, which can be a city, which can be a country, which can be the government, an institution, an organization, whatever, it is our target system. If the target system doesn't change the way it functions, it will keep on producing always the same results, and there will not be any transition. There will not be any change. But there is another level that we tend to keep aside, which is the people level. If we don't enable people to align the way they think, the way their heart, their feelings, their idea of normality and their daily behaviors to the new system rules that we have selected and that we want to make real, nobody will implement it because people will keep on behaving as before. This means that there will just be a gap between the new rules, which can be formal or informal rules that we expect to make real, and the way people behave. And this gap will jeopardize the change. This is why it is absolutely important. And this change, when this change, I mean, by properly using systemic change management in an inclusive way, it becomes really the methodology to change the idea of normality and the rules at any level, which means also concerning the gender perspectives. So for me, it's really, in my opinion, systemic change management is really the key to enabling human environments to change. Thank you, Laura, for this question, which really is important.
Thank you for the really excellent explanation. I love the bridge analogy, and I think it is something that is easy to picture. It makes it easy to understand. So we are really running up against the end of our session here, but I'd like to give everybody, all of our panelists, an opportunity in 30 seconds or less, if there is one key message that you would like the audience to take away from today's discussion, what would it be? Anita, since you are right here, I will ask you to go first.
Yeah, for me, it is one word, it is tools. Because for me, my discipline is really about tools, is really about methodology. And I really appreciate Luisa when mentioned tools, but also Vivian mentioned activities, and Anna asked what can be done. So I really appreciate the focus on the practical approach, which is really what I do. So this is my key message.
Vivian, how does that resonate with you? What would your key message be?
It is to involve women on the design in project design, implementation, and monitoring, and share gender-sensitive data with policymakers. Otherwise, we will not change our scenario.
Fantastic. Anna?
More research to have everything that has been mentioned, to have proof that this is real. Otherwise, we a lot of times hear this, I know you're just overdoing it a little bit, it's not that bad. So I would say that proof that this is an issue, that gender mainstreaming works, and how it impacts different genders, I think that's needed.
Thanks, Anna. Luisa, do you have one key message for our audience?
Following what Anita was saying, I think that she's right. Now we have to focus on how to do it. So we have to focus on the tools. And this is about innovation. This is about innovation ecosystems. And we know that those innovation ecosystems are the best ground to generate and growth and to generate innovation. And this is based on the stakeholders' engagement. So I really believe in stakeholders' engagement, but with two conditions. The first condition is that they have a fair and balanced way, and they are all represented along all the life of the project, even after the project. And of course, gender balance, diversity, and inclusion is a cross-cutting condition throughout the entire cycle. The second condition is that the stakeholders engagement needs to be done with a tested and certified methodology, because sometimes the stakeholders engagement may also represent a risk. And we saw the picture, an awful picture that Anita showed that was funny, but it's very sad. So absolutely, we have to use methodologies that are good, that are tested, that are certified, that ensure trust and transparency. And I think that, yes, it's very important, transparent. We have one that is very good. And now on our ends, this is the water-oriented living labs. I agree that living labs is the best way to involve everybody and give feedback to the policymakers. But policymakers need to be there. Women need to be there, policymakers, and all the representatives of the society. And with those examples, because we have already some examples on database solutions that are using living labs, water-orienting living labs, I think that we can do it very quickly.
Thank you so much, Luisa. So we leave you all with a call to action to actively work towards a new culture that values gender inclusion as an essential resource for building better cities. We know now that the opportunities far outweigh the challenges, and we do have the tools to make it happen. So a big thank you to our panelists for their insights, to our participants, and to the Multi-Source Project and Water Europe for driving the agenda forward. Let's take these ideas beyond today's webinar into our projects, our policies, and our daily practices to ensure that nature-based solutions truly benefit everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Thank you all, really.
Bye.